They said it was impossible. They said the old studios, the ancient hierarchies, the gatekeepers with their long lists and longer memories, would never bow to a pair who started as outsiders. Yet there they were, Yulong and young Mei Mei, not merely arriving on the scene but reshaping it. The night the box office numbers came in, the city felt different. Like the tide had shifted and the shoreline had been rewritten by slow, determined hands. It began like many revolutions do, quietly, almost carelessly. Yulong had spent years learning the invisible rules, which roles to accept, how to smile in photographs, how to make silence sell. He had watched colleagues follow the script and vanish after a single mistake. He wanted to build something permanent, not chase the flash of a single headline. And Mei Mei, whose instinct had always been to look harder at the world than to look into cameras, had an appetite for truth that embarrassed the polish of the industry. Where others curated themselves into safe, exportable packages, she kept asking, who do we leave out? Their first collaboration was small in budget and vast in courage. They turned away from glossy spectacle and instead invested in a script that smelled of the streets, brittle, honest, and alive. They recruited writers who had been pushed to the margins, cinematographers who shot for feeling rather than filters, and crew members who kept their songs and stories in notebooks because no one had asked to hear them. They did not seek permission. They sought permission for other voices. When the film premiered, it did not announce itself with fireworks and celebrity cameos. It opened on a rainy afternoon in a thin theater and unfolded like a confession. Audiences recognized themselves, a mother counting pennies, a son leaving, a small market vendor holding a life together by stubborn hands. The cinematography did not glamorize poverty. It listened to it. The performances were imperfect when perfection was demanded, and those imperfections were honest like breath. Word moved faster than any marketing machine. Clips were shared by teenagers, then by mothers, then by critics who could not help but cheer. Ticket queues wrapped around blocks. Independent theaters scheduled extra screenings. The film became a phenomenon because it insisted the world look at itself. And then it offered a mirror someone had finally polished. The box office numbers were the beginning of the shock. Industry titans who had once predicted doom for anything that refused the formula now called for meetings. Streaming platforms, wary of the usual model, negotiated deals. Festivals that had once favored pedigree suddenly awarded the film top prizes and visibility. But the real change happened in production rooms. The old checklist, bankable lead, safe arc, guaranteed ending, cracked. Executives began to ask different questions. What stories are we missing? Whose towns and mothers and small workshops are invisible on our screens? Resistance followed. The entrenched powers that profited from predictability were not quiet. There were op-eds, leaked memos, and critics who labeled the film an anomaly, a lucky blip. Some studios tried to clone the texture of honesty without the intent, creating glossy imitations that audiences dismissed as hollow. Yet the attempt to copy revealed something crucial. You cannot manufacture meaning. Either you listen, or you perform listening poorly. Yulong and Mei Mei's influence went far beyond a single film. They fought for credit where credits had been skimmed off. Writers, sound designers, local crews. Contracts shifted. Profit-sharing clauses were written to include junior staff. Production schedules softened. Child actors and younger crew members were protected, with strict hours and counseling. Mei Mei insisted on transparency and the protection of those whose names never made the posters. She used her power not to hoard but to distribute. New voices emerged. Directors who had been relegated to small circuits suddenly found meetings with producers who previously ignored them. Scripts that once gathered dust now had pages turned. The industry learned, awkwardly but inevitably, that audiences were hungry for authenticity. Film schools taught the film as a landmark text, not because it solved the problem of art and commerce, but because it made a convincing argument that they could coexist. A memorable moment that captured the cultural shift was small yet symbolic. A night screening in a provincial town where theater had reopened for the film after years of closure. Long and Mei. Mei sat in the back row with the janitor who had swept the floors in the 70s. After the credits rolled, an elderly woman stood up and said, voice cracking, "It's like the screen finally remembers." That sentence spread faster than any press release. The backlash never fully faded. Lawsuits were threatened by studios who felt their territory invaded. Smear pieces attempted to minimize the couple's role and to reframe their achievements as marketing stunts. Yet every time the noise rose, the industry moved another degree. Investors who had once refused risk discovered that risk, when managed with integrity, could lead to sustained profit. Film festivals adjusted categories. Funding bodies created grants for projects that told regionally specific stories. The old logic that labeled local as unprofitable began to fray. Internationally, the effect was seen in collaborations. Filmmakers from neighboring countries reached out for co-productions. Joint ventures blossomed where previously politics and precedent kept doors closed. Cultural exchange poured into the film language, and foreign audiences discovered stories that felt both foreign and intimately familiar. It became a new export, cinema that traded in truth rather than spectacle. Their activism was not performative. Long refused a deal that would have demanded his name only and would have hidden the writers. He walked away and publicly explained why. Mei Mei, whose image had once been highly managed, used the platform to speak about labor rights, child performers, and the ethics of celebrity. Their speeches were blunt, sometimes uncomfortable, and precisely what the industry needed. Critics debated whether this would last. Market cycles are merciless, they said, but institution-level change had begun. Unions strengthened. Small cinemas received new funding, and audiences learned to reward risk. Graduates of film programs entered a market that increasingly valued craft over casting lists. Importantly, the industry's moral imagination widened. Stories about ordinary lives ceased to be niche and entered the mainstream. Not everything was harmony. The pressure to repeat their success burdened them both. Each new project invited scrutiny. Every creative choice was parsed for authenticity. They endured personal attacks, legal fights, and the exhausting labor of balancing fame with advocacy. Yet they also took joy in small victories, community screenings that brought laughter and tears, writers finally paid fairly, and young directors given a real shot at telling their first films. Years later, when students asked Long and Mei Mei why they had risked so much, they answered simply, they wanted to build a stage where more voices could be heard. The prize was not the awards or columns. It was a theater filled with people who recognized themselves on screen. It was local craftspeople finally credited on postcard posters. It was a film class where students no longer heard the old decrees but a different question. What story will you tell? On a cool autumn evening at an industry retrospective, Long watched a line of new films that had never been greenlit before his and Mei's success.